Assalamu alaikum, runtings rude boy. Nabil Aziz, becoming the Alpha Muslim.com and the Becoming the Alpha Muslim podcast. Today my guest is, alhamdulillah, a Muslim and a scholar. The last few guests have been non-Muslims. So I get a chance to start with the full khutbat al-hajah. A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajim. Bismillahir rahmanir rahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen wassalatu wassalamu ala ashrafil anbiya wal mursaleen nabiyyina Muhammadin wa ala alihi wa ashabihi ajma'een amma ba'd. Okay, so this episode I wanted to talk about something that's really quite fundamental to, before we even get started talking about masculinity and self-improvement and things like that, we need to get the fundamentals straightened out. And that's one of the reasons why I publish, I get you guys to sign up for my email course, which is also fundamentals. So today we're going to try to understand Islam from three particular aspects, and I'll have our guest speaker try to explain. Our speaker today is Dr. Shadee Elmasry. He's the director for religious studies at the New Brunswick Islamic Center. He did his undergraduate at Rutgers, his postgraduate at Georgetown, and he has a PhD from the University of London. And he has been seeking knowledge the traditional way since he was 17. And after he finished his university studies, he returned back and is now the resident scholar and the director of education at the New Brunswick Islamic Center. And he's also the founder and head of Safina Society, which is a markaz, a center dedicated to teaching Islam the traditional way. So I'll give my friend and teacher, Dr. Shadee, a warm welcome. Assalamu alaikum, Dr. Shadee.
Wa alaikum salam, akhi. How are you? It's good to be on your show.
Alhamdulillah, alhamdulillah. How are you doing?
Alhamdulillah, very good, very good. And it's very important what you're doing about masculinity, because people really are clueless when it comes to what it means to be a man, right? And what it means to be male, and what all those implications are. So I think it's very important what you're doing.
Jazakumullah khair. Actually, I just listened to episode 3 of the Safina Society podcast today, so Jazakumullah khair for the shout out as well.
My pleasure. My pleasure.
So I'll just get right into it. I've already told you what we want to talk about. I think one of the most pressing issues right now, what I see, particularly with Muslims in the West, is this issue of Aqidah. And Aqidah has become like almost like a 4-letter word for some reason among a lot of Muslims in the West and even in our communities. And I wanted to sort of talk about it in a way that the language is not as difficult to appeal to someone who has no grounding in the subject. And one thing that you talked about, you've mentioned on social media, on your Twitter and Facebook, and we've talked about it as well, is understanding Islam through this 3-step framework, which is cosmology, epistemology, and methodology. So I was wondering if you could explain it in that way to us, and from that we'll, I guess, expand the discussion.
Okay, good. So, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, alhamdulillah, wassalatu wassalamu ala rasulillah wa ala alihi wa sahbihi man wala. Back in the 90s, people were studying, and the places that they were studying in were really devoted to knowledge. They were devoted to knowledge, and at some point, Dawah became more of the catchphrase than knowledge, right? And love, of course, love and Dawah are important, but they became more emphasized over knowledge, okay? And when this happened, slowly knowledge itself the emphasis on knowledge itself started to wane. And this has had really bad impacts on people, because once you combine da'wah and love, but you have sort of diminished the importance of knowledge and attention to detail when it comes to knowledge, right? You end up with a lot of what I call, pop da'wah, right? It's pop da'wah. It's basically any cultural phenomenon that you can get your hands on, and throwing an Islamic twist to it, right? And it becomes really meaningless, and it looks good though. In the beginning, it looks good because you're getting a lot of people. You got a lot of people having good sentiments towards Islam, but there is no point to good sentiments, right? If there's no understanding, right? And if it's just basically, like I said, it's pop dawah, right? And as you'll see, this pop dawah will bring a lot of people to have good sentiments about Islam. But when the waves of trials and tests at the philosophical level come in on people, and we haven't seen anything at the political level, right? We haven't seen anything at the political level. Physically, people are still living normal lives. But at the level of philosophy and culture, the waves are hitting, and there are very few people capable of actually presenting responses. Okay, I recently read an article here that said a Muslim girl wrote it, and she said basically, parents, stop telling children, right, that modesty comes in the form of segregation. In other words, don't tell children that they shouldn't be free mixing men and women, because this is segregation. Okay, so here you have a perfect prime example of someone who's gotten who's taken on a set of rights and a language, which is the language of your secular humanists, moralists, whatever, ethicists, and then applied it to a religion that has a whole opposite, completely different set of sources and cosmology. So this whole mix-up, and I'm telling you what it's going to lead to, is going to lead to a very watered-down Islam, right, which the next generation is going to pass on, and you're going to end up with the next generation that, why bother being Muslim at all? If we are no different than everyone else, if it's just a cultural symbol, then why bother using this label at all if it stands for nothing? So this is why, like you said, we got to go back to this three-part foundation that we build: cosmology, epistemology, and methodology, which basically means this. Cosmology is a very simple word, a very complicated sounding word, but it simply asks the question this: what do we believe in? What do we believe exists? Sorry, more accurate to say, what do we believe exists? Do we believe God exists, yes or no? Do we believe prophecy exists, yes or no? If we can't agree to these two, then there's no point in continuing the discussion about something, 5 steps later, when we don't believe in the first step, that there is God, there is prophecy. Secondly, and there's a day of judgment. So once we believe in these fundamentals of Aqidah, okay, then now we can continue our discussion. Okay, next thing is, okay, so we believe God exists. We believe God sent prophets. We believe there's going to be questioning. I need to now know, what are the details of God? Who is He? What did He ask? What did the prophet tell us to do? And what are the consequences in this life and the next? Now, in order to answer those, I need the sources. Where did God put His words down on this earth? Right? What books are they in? What people do I trust to transmit this? So this is epistemology. In other words, where do we find this truth? Written down in a language we can understand so we can act upon it. So that is epistemology. Okay? And again, here we split the cosmology question. We split with the atheists and those who don't believe in prophecy. Okay? And the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And then epistemology question, there's another, the main question and the main split is regarding between the Sunni and the Shia and the modernists, right? The Shia have their own version of Hadith and their own version of history, right? So we differ there. There's no point in continuing on discussing some branches of the law, right? Or of doctrine if we don't even agree on the same sources or what happened after the death of the Prophet, peace be upon him. Second, because that's where we get our knowledge from. Secondly, the Quranists or the modernists or people who have rejected the Sunnah of the Prophet, peace be upon him, right? In other words, the Sunnah meaning the Hadith transmitted from him. So if we don't agree with them, then there's another stop point, and there's no point in having a discussion about anything other than this point of dispute. And then thirdly, let's say we all agree on God, Prophet, we all agree on the fundamental sources of the religion, all right? So now you have something with Ahl Sunnah based upon the sources. Now we have to discuss methodology, right? And this is what we call usul al-fiqh, right? Usul al-fiqh. There are some things valid debates in usul al-fiqh, and there are some invalid debates in usul al-fiqh. In other words, opinions that are completely unacceptable in usul al-fiqh. Like what? Like the contemporary maqasid methodology, all right? Maqsadi methodology. The maqsadi methodology, where is it rejected? It's rejected if you say that the universal principles of the law are a source of the law, right? It's firstly a contradiction. I don't want to be too long-winded here, but it's a contradiction because how do we get the universal principles of Islamic law? By looking at the actual laws, right? And then deriving backwards from there, right? To what the principles are. So if you're going to tell me now, we derive these universal principles by looking at the individual laws, and then we got these principles now, and now these principles are our guiding light, right? Even if it contradicts the text, well then in that case, you just basically ate up your own source, right? So the maqasid approach is only supposed to help us in thorny 50-50 matters where we don't know which way to go, and it helps in that matter, but it is not a source of law by itself. So that's an example of, in methodology, a rejected methodology that is rejected logically and rejected by the ijma' of the scholars. So basically what we're saying here, and I always bring up a lot of bad news that's going on in the ummah, right? And the main reason being, we got to go back to knowledge. We've abandoned knowledge, okay? We have abandoned it, and it ends up with stuff that you see on the Tempest and in various Muslim blogs. That is really an absurdity that goes against what all Muslims have taught and known for 14 centuries.
Okay, so you mentioned one specific aspect that I want to expand on a little. So when it comes to cosmology, that's where a believer will split with an atheist. And then when it comes to... You go onto Twitter and you see a guy and he says, why do your women have to do this? Why does your law say this or that, right? You know, I said, and you have people debating back and forth. And I'm wondering, what is wrong with you? Why are you debating? How could you debate someone if that individual, he himself has not accepted your fundamental source of the law? Like, what is the basis of this debate? It's like playing basketball on a football field, right? You guys are speaking two different languages. So there's no standard. So we have to agree on a standard, right, before we have a debate. So this is where you're going to see, there's nothing with an atheist worth talking about other than if you're trying to convince him or show him why we believe in the Prophet, peace be upon him. That's it. You're not going to go and discuss rights. You're not going to discuss anything part of the law. There's no point. And then when it comes to epistemology, that would be basically Islam versus all of the other religions. And in all of the other religions, we put all of these innovating sects or heretical sects as well in the group.
All of kufr is one group, okay? Whether it's paganism, whether it's atheism is really just a form of abstract paganism because they do still worship certain ideals, but they're abstract. So the Quran, if you notice, rarely even addresses atheism. And Imam Al-Haddad, he said that atheism is something that does not is not possible for the human being. And also other philosophers said the human being is a God-making creature. He has to have a God, right? Something that he revolves around, right? Today, it's your whims and your egos. Last century, it was communism and capitalism. So it was various isms. And today, it's yourself. You worship yourself, right? The biggest indicator of that is basically the transgender movement, where what you want overrides the obvious biology that you see, on your own body. So, yeah, that basically this is where we're at. Also, amongst the non-believing peoples, right, there is two groups of people who have less harsh realities associated to them, and that is basically the Jews and Christians, because of their attribution of themselves towards Abraham and some semblance of religion based on, belief in afterlife and whatnot. Unfortunately, some people have mistaken that to mean validity for these religions. But as we all know, these are muharraf. Muharraf means the religion's been altered, and they have made many kufri statements, and Iman has to be in all 6 pillars of Iman, not in 1 or 2. So in this regard, the Yahud and Nasara are still considered kuffar, right? But they have some more rights than the rest of the kuffar. And the worst of all people are not the kuffar, and not the Yahud and the Nasara. It's the murtad. And Sharia does not allow us to have any contact at all with an apostate, someone who leaves Islam, because of the harm that they present to the community.
It's like in the Quran, Allah always calls all of the different forms of kufr dhulumat, and Islam is one nur, right?
Correct. So basically, yeah, all these things are all various darknesses based on the various nature and shape of the ego of man at that time, and the nur is one.
And then when we come to methodology, now here, is it the Sunni versus other sects thing, or is it something within Sunniism that the differences occur?
So when you're talking about methodology, people should read the book of Jonathan Brown for a quick summary called Hadith, Muhammad's Legacy to the Modern World, something to that effect. When we talk about epistemology, it's a very big subject, the subject matter of hadith. All right. How do we know what the Prophet said? This is the question. How do we know what the first generation of Muslims, how did they understand the religion? Right? Because how they understood it is the correct understanding, right? And only the form, or I shouldn't even say the form, some new matters, new tribulations that come up, we need some answers to. That they wouldn't have answered because those trials hadn't come up, right? Such as the ignorance of the Arabic language. Ignorance of the Arabic language was not a problem that they had. It's a problem that we have, and we have to answer certain questions. How do certain verses of Quran interpreted into other languages or translated into other languages? So the subject matter of hadith, anyone who is going to be grounded in any way, shape, and form in their religion has to do a deep study of hadith, okay? And it's not difficult. There are some excellent lecture series out there. There are some excellent books out there to give you a concept of how the scholars determined what is sound and what is not. And why should we believe that this is not all fabricated, right? When you see how extensive the network of hadith scholars are, from Tunisia to Persia, down to Yemen, up all the way up to what modern day Uzbekistan and Samarkand. And these individuals did not know one another. And this project for 300 years was not sponsored by anyone, right? There's no government that sponsored hadith collection. This was completely done by the scholars of the people. So a firm foundation in hadith is very important. And then afterwards, like you said, methodology is next, right? A firm, the other day there was a guy on Egyptian TV, and really may Allah Azza wa Jal judge these people, honestly, the way they do. The way they're putting on fitna on TV for us. This guy is going around, you've probably heard of him. He's claiming that he's the Mufti of Australia. I don't know how that happens anyway. Australia doesn't even have a national priest, let alone a Mufti. So he's fooling the people. They say, oh, Mufti Australia, right? Okay. So this guy, firstly, he's a murtad, obviously, or he's a zindiq. A zindiq is someone, his beliefs put him outside of Islam, but he's still got the garb and the talk of a Muslim, and he claims to be a Muslim. This guy is telling us that not only is wine permitted, but the Prophet, peace be upon him, used to make wudu with wine. Okay, and that pork is halal for us to eat, and that Ramadan is not necessary to fast, and that Hajj should actually be to Mount Sinai, okay, and that is greater than Hajj at Mecca. The man is spewing such garbage that if you don't know whether to vomit or laugh or throw something at the computer while you're watching this stuff. But he makes, his fundamental thing is very simple. He is a type of selective literalist, right? And this is what the modernists and the liberals and the reformers are. They are selective literalists, okay? So, just to take a simple example is why Mecca is the holiest city in Islam. He says it doesn't say so in the Quran. There is no line that says Mecca is the holiest city in the Quran. So, which is stating a fact, but in using it for something that is false. So, we say to you, if you are going to be such a literalist and you want the ruling to be written out for you, right, word for word, in that case, this is the same methodology that is used by ISIS, by Al-Qaeda, and all these things. They are pure literalists. They take no sense of context, or no sense of, forget context, okay? No sense of examining one verse by other verses, okay? No sense of recourse to the hadith. No sense of recourse to the understanding of the first generation. So this is a methodological flaw, that you want the ruling that you're looking for, okay, to be written in those exact words, okay, that you use. This is one mistake. Another mistake he makes the mistake saying that pork is permissible for the Muslims to eat because the Quran says that which is pure is permitted for you. And the Quran says the food of the people of the book is permitted for you. So we tell him, right, and the verses of the prohibition of pork, right? So what does he tell us? He tells us the verse that's prohibiting pork came first. Then Allah said the pure food is permitted for you, right? So we take the second one, not the first one. Well, we tell him, no. When you take two verses, the more specific verse, al-khas, overrides the general verse, even if it came before or after. Okay? Now here's the funny thing about these people that always fall into this. How do you know? The next question is, how do you know which verse came first? You can only know that through hadith, right? Through sayings of Sahaba and hadith. And yet, if you were to accept hadith on this grounds, right, you would have to accept so many other hadiths that come from the same source, right? You can't accept my testimony when you like it and reject my testimony when you don't like it, right? So they end up getting themselves caught in a web by using the hadith that they like and rejecting the hadith that they don't like, right? So this is just basically a summary of why the concept of methodology is so important, why the concept of a methodology, if it's misunderstood, it becomes a disaster.
Okay, so this alleged mufti of Australia, those things that he described, at least some of them, they would fall under the category of things that are necessarily known as part of Islam, right?
Yes.
So why is he, for example, a zindiq, a heretic, and not a disbeliever, a kafir?
No, a zindiq. Okay, so there could be two different usages of zindiq. The first usage, okay, zindiq, the real original usage of the word is someone who is a kafir. He's outside of Islam because of his beliefs. However, he continues to attempt or to dress his language and his actions as if he is a practicing Muslim. Okay, so that's how they use the term zindiq. But otherwise, this is not a heretic at all. His statements are because he rejects that which are known by necessity. It renders him a murtad and a kafir outside of Islam. Of course, you understand though that in the North American context, to say that someone's a kafir or a murtad or outside of Islam is akin. They have rendered it akin to a racial slur. You're aware of that, right?
Yeah.
The Dawah, what you could say, the Dawah industry or the establishment Dawah operations out there, they have their own form of political correctness, right? Which is basically a summary or a collection of things that at the conferences cannot be said, or that certain high-level leaders do not like, right? And it's trickled down as a result, right? And the conferences, the Muslims themselves are in a very bad state. The ignorance is rampant. Their influence with Western philosophical concepts and cultural understandings is probably now greater than the influence of Islamic knowledge upon them and understanding. So therefore, when you're standing in front of 3,000 people in a conference, you have to use a very special language, right? Which is why for the most part, I choose not to go to these things and don't accept the invitations because you're in a vulnerable situation and you can only speak a certain language. So they're constantly going back to, could I say this in front of 5,000 people? Could I say this in front of 2,000 people, right? Could I say this on CNN or Huffington Post? And this becomes the mi'yar or the standard of actually what's right and wrong now. So the Dawah establishment has taken over knowledge, right? And therefore you find that certain things that are so, blatantly obvious, and there should be nothing wrong with stating them, have become made wrong. They made them wrong, right? Because they know if I said this at a conference, I'm not getting another invitation, right? If I said this on the Huffington Post or at CNN, I am not getting another invitation. So I don't want it to be said. So when I see a local person saying it, right, he needs to put it down. He needs to make sure that this doesn't spread to the people, right? Because they'll start, wondering, well, what kind of language are you speaking, right? So all this is my issue with is that Dawah has been taken over, but knowledge has been undermined, right? And there's a big difference between Dawah and knowledge. And Dawah is a failed enterprise if it's not rooted in knowledge.
I think I remember speaking to you one time and mentioning that I saw somebody on Reddit saying that you're a Muslim as long as you believe in Allah and submit to the God of Abraham. And when it comes to the word of the word kafir or kuffar, they'll say that only someone who has believed 100% that Islam is the truth and then rejects it openly is a kafir. So there's this huge, disconnect just because of this lack or this excessive care with the language that the scholars and speakers are taking with their words. And I think basically what you're doing might be a good idea is to just stay at your markaz and teach the people, and then grow your reach online, because you don't actually need nowadays to go to conferences to reach a lot of people. You can do it over the internet, and you guys at Safina Center are doing a really good job with that.
Yeah, that's exactly it. And I actually have been thinking that a lot of us got into this as a type of dawah, in the name of dawah, and the concept of dawah was spreading very fast and very far and wide. But what I'm realizing is that there is no point in doing any dawah, right, if you have to constantly undermine, right, and water down your core concepts, right, in the meantime. So this is why what I'm taking is, and I'm always playing some sport or other, and recently the other day I was I love to be the underdog, right? So I stacked up the team, the opposing team. I stacked them up, and it was all of them versus me and some scrubs, basically. In sports there are scrubs, right? It's not like a derogatory term. It means like you're not good, right? So there's scrub. It's not a derogatory term. It's a fact. You're just
factual. Yeah. Noobs.
Yeah. So you're a scrub. right? So it's me and the scrubs versus like 3 or 4 other guys, right? Or four on four, something like that. So what was our strategy? Our strategy was to hole up in front of our goal, right? Everyone stay in their position in front of the goal, right? And then whenever we get whenever we get the ball, we're firing from long distance, right? We're firing from long distance, and we won that way, right? They could anything on net, right? And we're firing from long distance. So this is actually, I realized while I was playing, I'm like, you know what? This is the right methodology in this day and age because we got so many cards stacked against us. It's absurd that, you know what? Protect your guard, your own house, and the first house is your own soul, right? Guard your own soul, okay? Have a low center of gravity, have low costs, have low attachment, have very few political connections, so that you're not part of a network that once the thing goes down, everyone goes down with it, right? And then fire from long distance. And look, people listen, people don't listen. That's not your job, right? Your job is not to, Allah doesn't judge you by having an audience. He doesn't judge you by how many followers you have. He judges you by your taqwa and your deeds yourself, right? Whether or not you failed or succeeded in da'wah, it really has much less is going to be, you're not going to be asked about whether you succeeded in da'wah or not, right? So that's the methodology also, I think, of the great and the original teacher that many people had, which is Murabit Al-Hajj. He's out there in the desert, right? Pure, completely pure, okay? And people come to him, right? And obviously, we're never going to reach his level of piety. And also, we have the internet to fire away and put out our ilm out there, whatever knowledge we learn, you know, put it out there. You can do it straight from your own home. There was a da'i once, he used to travel so much. He was a scholar, actually. He traveled so much. One time he admitted to us that he spent 75% of the days last year out of his house. Okay? And this man had 3 kids. Now, needless to say, when his kid was 17 one day, he noticed he's skipping prayer. So he said, what's going on? He said, honestly, Dad, I don't really believe in this Islam stuff. Right? So, if that's the result of da'wah, then no thank you. If that's what people think da'wah is, then you're misguided, deluded, and probably your ego's leading the way.
Yeah, I think that's basically isn't it? That's one of the major qawaid fiqhiyya, right? Prevention of harm takes precedence over seeking benefit.
Yeah. Yeah, that's the thing, which we've lost too. When we were studying, when the students of knowledge in the traditional circles were studying with the ulama of Syria and Mauritania, okay, we were very cautious. Knowledge was prime. Guarding yourself was primary, right? Guarding yourself was primary. And honestly, the funny thing is that when you do that, you end up having a more successful da'wah, right? Because you become someone the piety and their life that you live is exemplary. Whereas if you just say, okay, in da'wah, well, let's cut this off and let's cut this off and let's cut this off, you become like a Walmart. Like you're everywhere, but it's cheap. There's nothing impressive about it, right? There is nothing impressive about this individual, right? And that's what people become. So we were focused a lot on this concept, you know, that guard yourself, study, make sure your beliefs are correct, purify your creed and your behavior. And from that, the amazing thing was that so many people found that to be more impressive. But once you're going for big mass operations, right, huge crowds, and then fundraising, right, so you're financially tied. One thing I always try to do is to keep myself financially as untied as possible, right? Right? As untied as possible. Why? Because you are owned by the people who write you a check to a degree, right? Yeah. Why is it that you notice the same opinions coming out of everyone who, in Islamic studies, who receives a university check, a check from the university? It's not a coincidence that they all have pretty much unilaterally a lot of the same beliefs, right? So, and opinions on things. Yeah, it's because you're getting paid, and without thinking about it, you will bow down and change what you believe based upon who's cutting your check. Okay. And likewise, if you go to the ma'ahid or the marakis, the centers where the scholar or the students of knowledge or the resident imams are free, they're getting paid by their students, right? Or their tuition, right? That they're collecting, or by people who believe what they believe. You will notice that they're much more free to talk and say what they really believe, right? And what they know the people believe too, and what is true. It's all about following the money, right? If the money is there, if you're getting paid, if you're financially independent, your mind is independent too. But if you are financially, constrained by, a secular liberal boss, then you have to make your Islam look secular and liberal, all right? Or else you're going to be out of a job. And I tell those people, be out of the job. You're better off being out of that job. And people say, oh, you can talk freely because, you're at your own center. You think I was born at my own center, right? I worked for 4 years with all these secular liberals, right? And I just said enough is enough. I'm not going to be controlled subtly or explicitly, right? So I said enough is enough. I'm not doing this. A lot of people in my family thought I was crazy, right? But what are you doing, right? I said, I'm not doing it, period. End of discussion. Well, do you have an alternative? No, I didn't have an alternative, right? But I knew this is the right thing to do on the side of Allah. Therefore, Allah's going to have my back. And He did. And within a month or two, I had a job again, right? And I was much more free. So.
Another thing I noticed actually is that these kuffar, they actually respect you more when you stand by your principles. Nobody respects somebody who doesn't stand for anything. I've had so many. I've been on dealing with people online for so long now, and the response is the same every time. And the people who sort of water down their faith or try to equivocate on certain things, like, they don't get any respect. They might tolerate those people. They might like those people more because they're quote unquote less fundamentalists or whatever they think we are, but they don't actually respect these people.
That's exactly it. I noticed that people of principle respect other people's principles, even if they're from different religions or different philosophies or different traditions or different madhabs. People of principle recognize one another, right? And I have a lot more respect to someone who isn't so sensitive, right? And says, look, this is what I believe, right? I know you believe differently, but, this is my belief, right? And then I also noticed that people of politics recognize and appreciate and love other political people, right? So if you are political about stuff, right, and you just watch your words and make sure no one's upset, which is fine as long as no principles are broken, right? But you will swallow your principles or hide them or put them under a cover, right? And other political people who want to appeal to everyone will love you, right? They will like you. And this is an assessment that I made. Let's say that you act politically and you start going on shows and on stages, and you don't talk about the real issues or what people disagree about or what's not important. Okay, so what's the result going to be? You're going to be loved by a lot of people. However, that love is meaningless for two reasons. Number one, you haven't given them what you truly believe, right? Number two, they only love you because you're not asking them to do anything, right? So what's the result going to be? You will have a lot of floozies in the audience, and you will have a lot of floozies following you online. They're just floozies, right? They like you because you're not asking them to do anything. Okay, so you're actually just justifying to them their own lack of doing anything. So in that sense, all of these followers, it's meaningless. So in contrast, though, if I was to go to a crowd and put a line in the sand and say, this is what the truth is, so what's going to happen? 90% of the people might get turned off, right? 50% might become your enemies. 40% say, oh no, this is too much, I can't handle this. And then 10% will be they know what you believe, and you've given them a challenge. They've accepted the challenge. They appreciate that someone's actually helping them to advance, right, and recognize their own flaws and what's right and wrong. And that 10%, that becomes your foundation. And now you can build something, on them. You keep going to them, and you keep educating them and learning with them, right? And we're all like just advanced students of knowledge here. We're just, or advanced in age at least, right? Just older students of knowledge. We help them. They might go around and become more knowledgeable than us. They help us. So we all know where we stand, right? And we all have the same belief, and we all have the same mission. And that's what you got going on in our community, where you got a group of guys. We all have we're on the same page, and we're building the same thing, and we're going towards the same goal, right? There's a lot more camaraderie and true, genuine, love and companionship and brotherhood. And we have a mission, right? As opposed to if I just gathered all the different groups and said nothing and offended nobody, right? Then everyone goes home, and we're not on a mission. We don't know really what we believe and what we don't believe. And all we're worried about is making sure that no one gets offended, right? And then when you worry about that no one gets offended, you guarantee to offend people of principle, right? That's the only people to offend, and those are the most important people.
And I think the political way, or the politically correct way, is sort of like a fake unity. It's not like a real unity. It's one of the reasons why I speak out against the way Muslims in the West have this alliance with the leftists and the liberals. And I think you've got a few, like a talk on that when I shared it on my Facebook page as well, when we're talking about this political activism against Islamophobia. And the second thing is that when you're this way, this politically correct way, and you actually don't speak the truth unequivocally, you're not actually gonna get any changes. So the problem with that is that you're being selfish, because ultimately, what's the goal? We want people to enter into Jannah. If we tell this kafir, no, you're not really a kafir, you're Ahlul Kitab, it's all right, we're all gonna meet in Jannah. Or you tell this sinful Muslim, or this munafiq, or this zindiq, that it's a valid difference of opinion, you are just harming him, and you're harming yourself as well, isn't it?
Yeah, you're doing nobody a favor except your own pocketbook, because you're getting cuts. Don't think anytime you see one of these guys out there talking that he's not getting a check in his pocket, right? And that check will lead to a second invitation from a third group or a fourth group, and that leads to more and more checks in your pocket, and more appearances on various TV stations and all these things, right? And at the end of the day, I look at, well, let's take a look at your students, the people who are closest to you. What does their deen look like, right? And you notice that such people, once they go on that route, the people around them, they no longer resemble pious students of knowledge with wara', or wara' means, scrupulousness, to make sure they're doing everything right to the T, right? No, you end up surrounded by other political people, right? So people who are, they're very interested in the worldly success of your dawah, okay? And I had a teacher who was surrounded, I'm telling you, if anyone spent 1 or 2 years with this individual, even 6 months or 4 months, he was transformed. He was a man of taqwa. He became a person of piety. He became someone who was respectable, right? Someone who knows how to control their tongue. Someone who controls their gaze. Someone who is not distracted by all the entertainment of life, right? Fast forward, after the individual got political, all of those original students, when they gather and talk now, they're all just lamenting what in the world happened, right? And now you look at who is this person surrounded with? Nobody, no students at all, just advisors, people fixing their schedule, all sorts of people that you wouldn't trust to trade your book with on the Day of Judgment. And this is actually one of the things the ulama always talk about, is that if you want to know who to befriend and who to keep their company, ask yourself, would you trade your book with that person? Or if your book of deeds was forcibly traded with that person, would you feel confident, going into that judgment day? Would you feel confident going into the judgment if your deeds were swapped, or if all of your books were thrown into a bag and you just pick a random book, right? And I'm telling you, that's one of the criterion that we look at a person. If you're a da'i or a scholar, let's take a look at a peek at the people around you, right? Not how many articles you have up or how many interviews you have on TV. So because I'm looking at this, it makes me very queasy. The whole concept of going around and being this celebrity imam, it makes me sick, actually. And it's something that I didn't sign up for, and this is not what I wanted. What I wanted was, when I signed up for this whole thing and dove into it with reckless abandon, is the company of the ulama who are pious, the private little gatherings, classes, even filling up masajid in the masjid. The masjid is the wage war upon now, right? Most of the celebrity da'is, tell me, when was the last time you saw them having anything at a masjid, right? No. It's like we're missing this very basic thing. The masajid, it's all at conference centers and space. To me is a big deal. It's very hard to be arrogant inside of a masjid. It's very hard to be political inside of a masjid. So space to me is important. So this is why I became, I've soured so much towards the Dawah establishment, and this is not what I signed up for. It's not what I want, and I'm going in another direction and doing more work. Actually, we're more busy than ever, right? And I think it's a sign of Allah's tawfiq that we're starting to do things right, and it's the old way, right? In religion, the old way is the right way. Monitor your own taqwa first, your own self. If that means having to give up something like being on the media, being on social media so much, then give it up. If it means that you have to give up going to certain places, right, and certain conferences, then give it up, right? So that's what I'm looking for, and then, use whatever means you can where that doesn't undermine the integrity of your work and your own religious caution. Use that and I'll let Allah do the rest. And that's the methodology that we're on right now. And then honestly, I could not care less whether the result is big or small. It's the principle and how you're going about doing it. That's the victory. The methodology and the means is the victory and the success, and not the numbers and the results.
That's sort of almost related to something in personal development, where they tell you that you should fall in love with the process and not the actual results.
Wow, I really love that. I actually never heard that statement before, but I really love that statement. It makes a lot of sense, and it's that's what I believe in. Whoever said that, that's what I believe in. Because this process is if you notice the masajid, it's driven up. The age is driven up. In other words, the older you get, the older you get in the masjid, the more respect you're given, right? Whereas if I'm looking at the current day conference culture and social media culture, it's driven down, right? It's driven to whoever is more silly and funny, and goofy and all that stuff, right? So it's almost like sports, where the older you get, the more bad news it is. You don't want to get old in sports, right? So a lot of the conference stuff and the pop dawah, which I'm calling it pop dawah, it's like that. It's driven down in age, whereas the masjid, it's driven up in age. The older you get, the more respect that you are given. The more serious, you're expected to be more serious in the masjid. You're expected to be more scholarly. Whereas in the conferences and in the social media, you're expected to be almost more, pop dawah, more silly and more funny and all this silliness, right? So, and more politically correct. So it's a total different arena, total different ballgame.
You know, I was looking at my website analytics one time and looking at something called bounce rate. And bounce rate is the percentage of people who come to your website and read that one page and they click off. And when you're trying to improve your analytics for your website, you want to get that number down. So you don't want them to come and view that one page and leave. You want them to stay on your website. And when I was reviewing that, I thought to myself, wait a minute. I don't want them wasting all their time on my website. I want them to read my stuff and then go and implement it and work on themselves and improve themselves. So it's like it's sort of a mindset shift you have to think about. Rather than yourself, you have to think about your audience more and what actually does benefit them.
Yeah, it's a huge mindset shift, and it's the difference between the driver of content, driving content versus responding. So I have a lot of friends who help me out, and they always say, hey, this works, right? This brings people in and whatnot. Well, I say, my response is, look, you know, I'm not going to respond to the consumer. This is not Walmart here, right? I'm not selling sneakers, right? I'm not responding to the consumer. My boss is the book, is the text and the ulama, right? That's my boss. If they are pleased with what I'm saying and what's is done correctly, right? That is what's important, right? Have we lost that? Like, that's what's important. Now, if you want to give me something that enhance it here and there, like, you know, that's fine. But when it comes to content and the goal being to get people on the website, feel very uncomfortable about that, because that is not our goal, right? Yes, we want people there, but as long as we're not altering our content, I have no problem with all that business strategy and all this stuff. I have no problem with any of that. And also that you do not imagine for a second that having a lot of clicks or whatever equals success. It is a type of success, but it is not success, right? It's definitely a form of success. And it makes me happy when I see that a post has been shared 100 times. I'm very happy, right? But that's not my goal, right? I'm not going to go and put some sensational, stupid commentary out there just to get likes and posts and hits and whatnot. And this is where the Dawah folks have to remember the priorities, and they need sometimes seniors, elders, to guide them and remind them, right? What is your goal, right? So that's why being in touch with the ulama is very important. And alhamdulillah, I have a number of sheikhs and teachers who are off the grid. They're off the grid. And because they're off the grid, you know, they're able to just remember what's actually really important. And to me, that's very important to have that influence.
Yeah, it's like in the Quran when Allah asks Ibrahim to make the call to Hajj, and He tells him, "Alayka nida wa alayna." What's the word, Sheikh?
Al-balagh. Yeah, إنما عليك النداء وعلينا البلاغ. Right? You make the call and we will send it to people. And I realize that this is a better system, right? I just do I'm focusing now. I'm actually going back to studying now. Now that I'm off so much chasing after things and chasing after and falling into this sort of trap, right? I'm actually studying again. I have teachers again. I'm back hitting the books again. I'm studying every night, right? And I have more time. I'm able to focus. And then once you present something after that, you present something better. You present something with more basis, with more meat and potatoes. And that's basically what I'm looking at. And that's the right way to do things. But this, and ultimately, honestly, there are people who want to be the accepted imams out there. And then you have the middle people. You got some people, I can't say everyone's just either one way or the other. You got some people out there who, yeah, they're out there, they're going to every conference, they're politically correct, but their heart's in the right place at the same time. We're not going to say that it's black and white. The world is, nothing's black and white. But I would actually much rather be a principled person and just let the consequences, let the pieces fall wherever they fall, and then you bear the brunt. And yesterday I wrote, there are some people, they always have to check where the wind is blowing, and then they take the path of least resistance, right? Takes the path of least resistance. And those people are the people you have to stay away from. They're closer to hypocrisy than Iman, right? You got to stay away from those types. Those people will destroy you and destroy your deen and everything else. So, you don't want to be near those munafiqs.
Yeah. So, in my email course, I have I teach them sort of 5 fundamentals related to how they can get a mental model that they can view the world. Because, if we can talk about everything that's wrong with the world until the cows come home. Every week there's some controversy. What I was thinking was, can we give them the fundamental model so that whatever they look at, they have those glasses, those Islamic glasses that they can look through it, and immediately they don't need to wait for some sheikh to make a Facebook post about this controversy or that controversy. They know, this is wrong, and they can move on. So how can we tell them, how do they seek those fundamentals when it comes to this aqidah that they need to know? We spoke about cosmology, epistemology, and methodology. How do they achieve those fundamentals? What do they need to study? What are the 80-20 it for us?
Well, I always tell people, you will never be independent from the ulama. But if you do need the basic tools to decide and to understand what's right and wrong, then what you need to do is you need to spend a decent amount of years in the presence physically, or studying with scholars, right? Studying with them, because there are a lot of tools. And always, if you want, in a nutshell, like right now I need an emergency understanding of things. Well, the answer to that is, you always go back to the sources. You ask the person who is speaking, right? With what expertise are you speaking? Where is, Quran tells us, فَوْقَ كُلِّ ذِي عِلْمٍ عَلِيمٍ. Above every scholar is a more learned scholar. Which means, if you're reading something about the deen on some website, you ask yourself the question, is this author, do they have teachers? Do they have scholars? Do they have a background? What is the source? So, in the nutshell, it's consider the source. The simple words, consider the source, right? With me, I'm very open. People know who my teachers are. They know that my teachers are, that I learned my fiqh and aqidah from Sheikh Sadiq bin Sidna, right, who was a student of Murabit Al-Hajj. He's also, I think he's like some distant relative as well, which is not important. The important thing is he studied with Murabit Al-Hajj, right?
I'm sorry to interrupt you, Sheikh. So you're a Maliki in your fiqh, or?
Yeah, Maliki in fiqh.
Because I remember seeing you post the word of Imam Al-Haddad, and one time I remember you reciting the salawat of Al-Shafi'iyya, which I've never heard anybody except for the Shafi'is recite the salawat that way.
Yeah, so basically when it comes to so we had a shiukh from Mauritania, and then slowly we started to meet the ulama of Yemen, in Hadramawt, of Tarim. And I went there myself, and I loved those ulama. And they have tasawwuf there is very heavy. They're heavy on tasawwuf, much more so than the Mauritanians. The Mauritanians have it, of course, ilmi based, but the Ulama of Tarim, they emphasize dhikr a lot, and I found it to be very purifying because we have so many sins and we're exposed to so many bad environments that I adopted their study of tasawwuf, their methodology of practicing tasawwuf and making dhikr. And so I took in a lot of things from them. So my main two role models, I would say, that I look up to is Murabit Al-Hajj, whom I've never met, right? I've never met him, but I have met his students. Then through Sheikh Salik, I've met his son, Sheikh Abdul Rahman, and not only met him, I studied with him. When I was living in England, I used to visit him, and also on the phone. I would study with him on the phone. I had Arabic teachers who were from Mauritania too, from Washington, D.C., Sheikh Talib Al-Qalqami, who was there hired by the ambassador, actually, of Mauritania to teach his son Arabic. And I discovered him and ended up benefiting from him more than anyone else. But then the Habayib of Tarim, Yemen, they were so beautiful. Their way of dawah, their way of the practice of tasawwuf, all these things were so beautiful that I took my other half of my ilm from them, from the Habayib of Tarim, Yemen, and who are some of the, really, to me, I consider them the best people on earth. Unfortunately, some of them have been a bit political these days, which is not the manhaj of the Habayib. The Habayib should not be political, right? Their motto was, we give the dawah to the oppressor and the oppressed, right? We don't get involved in their politics and support one over the other. Obviously, we support the oppressed when he's oppressed, but as for their the politics of certain matters, their motto was never to get involved. Just, we call the ruler and the ruled, and we don't take sides or get involved in their politics. So, unfortunately, some of them have sort of not done this, and also they have been pushed now. Unfortunately, I feel that they've been pushed to join this whole politically correct conference culture, which is very upsetting to me personally. But anyway, they know what they're doing. I know my positions on things, and I take from them what I benefit, right? And which is their whole methodology in tasawwuf and dawah and ilm and whatnot. And so that's why I have two streams: the one from West Africa and the one from Tarim, Yemen. And of course, the Aqidah. From the best of people to teach Aqidah are the Shawam, Ahl-Sham. So the ulama of Sham are, some of the best in studying in the matter of Aqidah.
And what would you recommend a beginner student to start studying first? Because there's quite a bit of confusion online where people will sort of, I guess, hate on studying Aqidah. Some reasons there are some reasons for that might be valid, and other reasons where they've sort of bought into this. Okay, we don't need to study Aqidah. We can just try to understand the Quran and learn quote unquote Quranic Arabic, if there is such a thing.
Yeah. Well, if you don't study Aqidah, you don't know what you're doing, really, honestly. Someone those who are putting down Aqidah as a sectarian subject. You know that this is the latest thing they're saying. Sectarian. Well, I mean, that's an absurdity. It's absolutely absurd. Yeah, so there's going to be differences. Does that mean that I'm going to go and try to kill people and fight them and whatnot? No, you're going to have beliefs. And here's the thing. What did Umayyah bin Khalaf, what did he discover? A truth about Islam and about the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, right? That Allah Azza wa Jalla in Surah An-Nun, right? Surah Al-Qalam, right? Mentioned him and yani, he discovered the one rumor that was true. He said that this religion divides father and son, right? It's true, but it's something no one can deny. However, he used this truth for a wrong end, for a bad end. And the truth is, yes, it does divide father and son. A division that is good, right? A sound and correct division, right? If you are if your boat is sinking and you're headed for an iceberg and you shout at everyone, hey, we're headed to an iceberg, right? Watch out, be careful. And no one listens to you. Then you say, guys, let's get on the lifeboats. And 5 guys get on the lifeboat. And 5 guys don't get on the lifeboat. Can you be accused of dividing the fishing trip. You didn't divide the fishing trip. You actually saved 5 people, and 5 people chose a path of destruction. So that's how I view Aqidah, that you're saving people, you're saving yourself, and you're clarifying what is right and what is wrong. And that is never division. Clarifying what's right and what's wrong is never division. And then acting upon that is never division either, right? So, yeah, some people like to clarify it, but then they go on behaving as if nothing happened. So they fraternize with heretics and zindiqs and all sorts of stuff. And just waiting until the Satanist groups start making moves in the interfaith circle just to see, I really want to see how they're going to react to that. Are these two going to be brothers from our satanic tradition, right? I mean, because now, like I said the other day, you can't say the word kuffar. It's politically incorrect to say the word kafir. So, but you have to say our brothers from other faith traditions, okay? It's a bunch of hogwash. I have great relationships with people of all sorts of religion, but not on the basis of religion, right? Not as interfaith, just as a neighbor, as, former employers, employees, workers, whatever, neighbors, okay? People in the city council, fine. I don't care what your belief is. You believe what you want, but we're not going to come on the same platform and say we're all brothers in this matter. No, when it comes to religion, we are not brothers. We have nothing in common, right? You take your religion and go that way, and let me take my religion and go this way. We could meet as neighbors, fine. We could be anything else, fine, right? But when it comes to religion, lakum dinukum waliya din. And whatever happened to that, So.
I remember I was giving the khutbah one time, and the whole khutbah was about explaining what the word Allah actually means. And after the khutbah, people were, coming up to me and they were like, we've been saying La ilaha illallah all our lives, but nobody actually, we never actually learned what it means in detail. Yeah. So is that the place where everybody has to start? What's the starting point? Because a lot of the times, Muslims in the West, they want to find a teacher, but they can't find one, or the imam is not qualified to teach them, or what's the best way to go about learning this stuff?
I would say that there are 2 starting points. The first starting point, you have to do two at the same time. The first starting point is, as you just said, the Aqidah. Who is Allah Azza wa Jal? Who is this God that you are worshipping? That's the first thing. And who is the Prophet, peace be upon him? Because how do we know about Allah from the Prophet? You also need to study very thoroughly the history of how the ulama gathered this knowledge. In other words, the history of Hadith collection and the history of ulum al-Quran. How is the Quran gathered? Why is that? Because where are we getting all this information from, right? Someone may say to us, oh, they're very beautiful, but how do I know this actually happens, right? How do I know this actually happens, right? Any intelligent person will say, well, yeah, how do I know that that's actually what the Prophet taught, right? So there needs to be some study of epistemology. So where do we get our hadith from? How is the Quran documented, right? That's a very important question. Ulum al-Quran. So the first thing I taught in the Awailim scholarship track in Safina Society was Ulum al-Quran and Ulum al-Hadith, right? Ulum al-Quran and Ulum al-Hadith. And then from there, you studied Ayat al-Ahkam, which are the main points of Aqidah that are very crystal clear in the Quran itself, right? So that's how I do it. So it's a combination of Aqidah plus Ulum al-Quran and Ulum al-Hadith, so that they know, well, where am I getting this information from? Are you just believing me because I got the cap here and the turban, or what? You don't want to be naive. Right? What if someone comes and gives them a better, more fuzzy description of things? Are you just going to go believe them? Right? So that's why epistemology to me is, you got to go right away with the epistemology as well as the Aqidah. So 2 classes at once.
I think that's the need of the times, right? In the past, you would not necessarily have to do the epistemology because there was no doubt in the actual sources of truth. whereas
Yeah.
now there is some room for doubt to come in, I guess.
Yeah, there's plenty of doubt. Room for doubt is speaking very generously, right? There is direct doubt, and you got people, unfortunately, that whatever, they weren't educated, they didn't learn these things, which is, I don't want to say whose fault that is, but obviously some ulama did their job, some didn't. And whatever it is, population went crazy as well. We have to remember that. The population of Muslims skyrocketed through the roof way faster than the ulama could respond. So that's another thing that we can't forget. That's why we have so many people who are unlearned, and unfortunately, they're very learned on how to write, on how to use media. They're not learned in Sharia and Deen, but they know how to write, how to use the media, how to do all these things. So it actually becomes a huge fitna for the Muslims. Huge fitna, because you got very intelligent people, very influential people who are just, they're jahl, and they're shukuk. They have so much shukuk. So it's probably going to get worse. My estimation is going to get worse. And my estimation, honestly, and a lot of people criticize me for being really sour grapes, but I'm telling you, I think the masajid are going to be are going to start getting empty in the next generation. Because if this is the Islam that's winning the day, if liberalism, this liberal and this wish-washy business is winning the day, then when these people marry and have children, okay, how are they going to, what justification will the children have to retain any form of Islamic identity, right? Is it just a cultural thing, and just for fun, like just a neat thing, like we have pakoras and, you know, others don't? Is that what it is? I don't get what it is. What is the justification? Why should I expend any effort to lower my gaze? Why should I expend any effort, right, in anything, you know, related to this deen? Because our deen requires a huge effort, right? If you want to be part of this deen today, you're going to be lifting some heavy weights. Just try to lower your gaze and handle what you see on the internet. Just try to handle that. You'll spend years just on that, right? So that heavy lifting has to have a basis. And if you have taken that basis away from people, then when it's time for heavy lifting, they're not going to do it. They just won't do it at all.
Sheikh, I think it's already arrived. You know, the Murtadeen, they still call themselves Muslims.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then there's people who have, you know, not an ounce of Islam in them, except that they were born to Muslim parents and they have a Muslim sounding name. But they haven't become Murtad explicitly, but they still call themselves Muslim.
We call those heritage Muslims, right? Now, why am I being negative and sounding off these alarms? If you're a Muslim guy, if you're a parent, if you're a dad, if you care about yourself or your kids, you need to study. You need to study really hard, right? You cannot afford anymore to be ignorant, right? You need to study, right? So that you yourself, there's no institution that's going to come to your aid. There's no institution that's going to help you. You need to know stuff yourself, right? And that's why I'm sounding the Prophet ﷺ, when he told us about the end of time, did he tell us about all bunch of good things that are going to happen? No. He told us all the bad things. Why? To tell you, study, go back, learn this stuff yourself. Save your own deen by studying. Ignore all this pop dawah and this silliness and this stuff. Go back to hardcore studying, okay? Hardcore studying. Study your Aqidah, study Arabic, study the Quran, and you have to do it yourself. You might find yourself, you got a job transfer to Kansas. What are you going to do? Lose your deen? Your parents, your family, what are they going to do? They're going to just lose their deen, right? So my point of people is sounding these alarms, so to speak, is to tell you, you got to study. You got to do this yourself. Do not expect that anyone will do it for you. You know, so that's why I'm talking like this and sounding these alarms and being very concerned and worried, right, about the state of the future. And I live in the negative. I don't look at the negative only. I live in the negative, right? Because I have to see what shark's coming, because I'm not out there to protect the people. I'm out there to protect myself. And when I talk to people, I'm the first person that I'm talking to, right? And maybe years down the line, my kids will come upon these recordings, right? And maybe, it'll stir something, or a grandkid or something, and he realizes, oh, that's what my grandfather used to be on. Well, maybe I'll take, I'll take advantage of that or something, or maybe I'll think about that. That's why I do this talk. The talks help me, right? And my main concern is I never believe for a second that I'm safe. No matter you work in a masjid, you don't work in a masjid, whatever it is, if you believe for a second that you are safe, right, then you're clueless about everything. You're not safe. At any time, fitna can come to you. Allah can cause you to move. Allah can cause you to have to get another job. And then all of a sudden you're in a total different situation and you lost your deen, right? So, this is why, that's my attitude towards the whole situation. And that's why it seems like it's alarmist. It is alarmist for the right reason.
Yeah, I have three daughters now, and that's like my biggest worry is that, how am I going to try my best to make sure that they stay when it's time, they stay on, some semblance of the straight path and practicing properly, because it's just getting worse and worse. I don't know. My generation is okay. We were born like in our generation. We were not raised with that much Islam, but Alhamdulillah, Allah guided us and we started practicing. And then,
bro, dude, the Fasik, the guy who hardly prayed, right? He hardly prayed and he smoked, okay? And he yelled at his wife to get him some tea, and horrible person, right? That guy, he probably had a better Aqidah than some of these academics today. That horrible human being of the past, of the 70s and the 80s, right? He wouldn't have questioned some of the things that are being questioned today. And believe it or not, guess what I tell? I actually I tell my family, and I tell people, be careful of the Muslims. You don't have to worry about a lot of other people. You got to worry about the Muslims, because they themselves are a force against Islam. You go and you hang around with enough Muslims, eventually, if you're not selective, right, with the Muslims you hang out with, you will find yourself slipping and slipping and slipping. Because unfortunately, I really just recently came to the conclusion, one of the biggest problems is the Ummah itself, right? These people, it's as if they don't want their own religion. That's the only conclusion. When I look at what's going on, I don't see that the Zionists or the liberal Democrats can touch a knowledgeable Muslim, right? It's his Muslim family. It's his Muslim community. It's the other parents in the Islamic schools. It's sometimes even the administrators of Islamic schools. They themselves don't want a lot of aspects of Islam. And that's the biggest problem. And once I hit that conclusion, it was sort of a very scary conclusion, but it made so much sense. Why is it that people migrated away from the Muslims and made Tawbah? When you were living in Cairo and Karachi, you were just a corrupt guy or just a jahil, right? But when you came to America and you were alone from what? From the influence of the Muslims. All of a sudden you started thinking, we need a religion here. We need a God. We need to know what's true. Right? Have you noticed this? How many immigrants came over and they were a bunch of bumbling regular guys and women, and all of a sudden they discovered their Islam in America. And now, in comparison to the rest of their family, they go back to their home country, and their family is like, "What are you, some kind of Maulana right now?" Right? And his family is his biggest enemy right now. His family is the biggest problem he has, not America. America supports you and you do what you want, right? The Muslim family is the one who is against him now. So people out there, attach yourselves to ulama, but be very suspicious of the Muslims and also of any pop culture dawah type of operation. It's just going to be watered down stuff that's no good.
Another thing I'm worried about is the websites, because when my daughters grow up, inshallah, these websites won't be around because they've still got a while to go. But I mean, I'm just worried about the sisters, they go on websites like the Tempest or Muslim Girl or Alt Muslima, and then they just get all the way messed up.
Yeah. That's I think probably. I don't know if there's a guy who takes care of his daughters and he loves his daughters and he educates them, teaches them. I teach my daughters. I teach them that there are people out there. Let me teach you a word. It's called fasiq, right? And they're like, oh, what is that? Fasiq is a Muslim that you will see, right, who openly doesn't practice their deen or believes in something that is wrong, right? And I will warn them from the fact. You don't need to warn them about kuffar. They know what a kafir is. You don't need to tell them. They know that those people are Muslim, okay? And we could be nice to them. They're neighbors, whatever. They're not Muslim, right? So it's actually psychologically easier. It's psychologically a shock. I remember my daughter, there was a teacher in the school, in the Islamic school, and the teachers are mandated they have to wear hijab, right, in the school. So she has this teacher, and she doesn't know that the teacher outside school doesn't wear hijab, right? So they went out, and we were eating ice cream out one time, and I'm telling you, she saw the teacher without her hijab on, right? And she was sitting there, she didn't talk the whole time, right? Now, has she seen people without hijab? She's seen Muslim women without hijab. She's seen non-Muslim women. She's a girl, she's seen cartoons, she knows stuff, right? Right? But she's never seen this concept of, wait, why would you wear it and then not wear it, right? This type of dissonance she never seen before, right? And she was shocked. And I told, look, let me teach you something. There's something called a fasiq out there. They're just born Muslim and they don't act upon it. And we make dua for them, right? We make dua for them. And that's it, make dua for them. And may Allah bring them back to the past. And may Allah protect us from falling into what they fell into, because at any time, of course, kids, they see that, okay, we're the Muslims, right? They can get a little overconfident too. I have to warn them. Be careful. Be careful. Don't ever look down on another Muslim. You may end up being a fasiq just like them, right? Do not ever look down on another Muslim, right? Or upon kafir, or upon anyone, because Allah does not like this attribute. The one thing about studying Aqidah and studying fiqh and all these things, and sometimes you're at the risk of losing your own humility.
Yeah.
And I warn my students and myself and my kids about that all the time. Do not lose your humility. We can slip and fall and be like these people any day that Allah says kun fayakun if He doesn't like our attitude, right? So I always worry about that.
Yeah. I noticed that you rarely or almost never speak about politics and stuff like that. Is that on purpose?
That's more of, there are 2 points. The first point is, I'm very skeptical about where we get our information from. That's the first thing. So people say you got to watch the news to be aware. Well, the person who is giving you the news, you have to you're implicitly accepting his philosophy. That this is what's important and other things are not important. And if I don't believe in his philosophy, then, I'm not going to actually, a lot of things they tell us is important is not important. Secondly, I always look at the root cause of things, right? And what happens in the world is the result, the branch, not the root. So that's why I've always been turned off from politics, because what do you expect? These people, they don't believe what you believe in. Why do you think that they're going to do anything that you ever agree with, right? So in that respect, I'm just not interested in hearing what a lot of news agencies have to say about things. And it's also very subjective. And I believe in the phrase, if you want to do one great thing, you have to say no to 100 good things, right?
Yeah.
Even if there was good in being politically an activist or whatever, and I hate to use that word, the activists make me sick, but I have to focus on something, right? And I choose that my focus is on ilm, and getting ilm out there, so that it doesn't get, you got to focus on something. So that's my focus.
Tell us a little bit about, because there might be people listening who don't know of Safina Society. Tell us a little bit about the sort of classes that you offer at Safina Society.
Safina Society is dedicated to the 8 sciences of the religion, which are Quran and all of its subjects, from tajweed, tafsir, ulum al-Quran, Sunnah and all of its subjects, such as Shama'il, such as Hadith, the Sunnah. The next 2 subjects are Usul al-Fiqh and the Arabic language, which are the tools. We call these ulum al-ala, or the tools of the sciences. The next subjects are the 4 subjects of Hadith Jibreel, which are Aqidah, Fiqh, Tasawwuf, and Tazkiyat, and Alamat as-Sa'a, signs of the end of time. Signs of the end of time is another subject that is basically, for most people, politically incorrect. Talk about signs of the end of time. These are the subjects that we're devoted to. And we offer the classes. Our methodology is for every age group and category. So we have a track for adults, converts, or recommitting Muslims who have never studied before. We have one for high schoolers. We have one for middle schoolers. We have a children's program for elementary school. We have a Hifz program. We have a track just for Arabic, right? So we divide up the knowledge, or the teaching of the knowledge, the classes, into these categories. And in this methodology, you're able to focus more on what they need. So it's the same curriculum, but it's driven differently based on the age and the situation of the students. Safina Society is located in the New Brunswick Islamic Center, which is in North Brunswick, New Jersey. It's basically incubated by the New Brunswick Islamic Center until it's, becomes its own thing. And it will never leave, inshallah, New Brunswick Islamic Center, because I believe that we have to stick to the masjid, right? The masjid, most important thing, and the knowledge takes place inside the masjid, not vice versa. Not divided from the masjid. So we have both. So that's basically a summary of what Safina Society is. We have 200 students this year. Alhamdulillah, we have 4 or 5 mashayikh teaching along Quran, Shafi'i fiqh, Hanafi fiqh, tajweed, right? Various subjects like that. And, we use the media, and we have a good group of brothers, and the sisters have their own camaraderie. We believe in separation of the genders, unlike today's Tempest article telling us that this is separation. We tell you it's the exact opposite. It's the exact opposite. We love the separation of genders. We don't separate genders like, oh, you go to this rat-infested sister sect. Right? Some of the sisters recently said, "Oh my gosh, our rug hasn't been vacuumed." Well, we're going to get right on top of that, right? So we make sure that they're happy. The sisters love the fact that they have their own camaraderie, and that there's segregation tends to breed a type of lookism, right? Where the, prettier sisters are going to have an advantage, right? And it causes fitna and all that stuff. So we tell you that whatever you're going to read on Tempest, it's the exact opposite.
Yeah, I was just reading an article on a non-Muslim website, and in the article and the comments are like, it's not just Islam that separates the sexes. This is like a feature of all traditional societies. It's only like recently in the 20th century that this changed. Actually,
one of the local Islamic schools, we have a very good Islamic school here. They brought him in to speak. He is, I don't know, Quaker or something. But he's studied all these civilizations, and he said they have the longest, most successful civilizations, longest running civilizations. They have 2 things in common. Number 1, they separate genders and they mix ages. And he says, American society does the exact opposite. We separate ages, like first grade, second grade, and teens and all that. Like, when was the last time you saw a bunch of teenagers with a bunch of 40-year-old women with a grandma with a, you'll never see that. Them walking, right? He said, mix up the ages and separate the genders. That is the best. That is the formula for success of civilizations. So that's something that in our community we're aware of, and we always try to do these social gatherings where it's not like there's a brick wall between the genders, but we don't hang out together. We're not going to sit. When we go to someone's house, you know whose house you're going to. You say salam to them. There's nothing wrong with that. You ask them how they're doing, how's everything. That's fine if you see them in the hallway or whatever. But you're not going to hang out with them, right? And we separate the genders, but we mix up the ages so that the shabab, they're with the elders, right? And they know each other. We know them, they know us, and we mixed up, in that respect.
And if people want to enroll in Safina Society, do you have, is it all on site or are there online classes as well?
It's all on site, and ArcView, which is our online, the beta version is starting in January. Pretty much we've recorded all the classes that we're going to record for now. The beta version is on there, is going to show up January, inshallah, and people can start studying with us. And then eventually we're going to be creative. After we get the beta version and make it very simple in the beginning, eventually it's going to get creative where we're going to have types of programs where you watch certain videos, then you come into the center, then we do, intensives for you to, have an intense weekend experience of learning. And then, we got creative with it afterwards. So we could build the type of small community outside of New Brunswick, North Brunswick, that's connected to us. Some people said, well, what are you going to do? You're going to be like Bayina. No, I don't want actually that. I don't like big, huge operations. I like, sizable, decent size operation. But at least, but we focus a lot on the quality. I don't like having something huge. It's just not in my personality. I don't like huge audiences and stuff. And then it ends up, you open the door for the quality to go down or for fitan to happen, or it gets in people's head and people are showing off now. And I don't like that stuff. So I like to keep it small. But at the same time, we need to outreach to people outside the area. So that's why we're doing the ArcView.
And you said the beta version will be available where?
Supposedly, it's supposed to be January 2017, and it'll definitely be on my Facebook page. It'll be the online website with all the lectures on it, some short, some long, based on subjects with little Q&A, little quizzes, right? So you could actually start studying formally, one thing at a time, one subject at a time, and hope, and we'll see what happens from there. It's a beta version so that we can experiment and see what works and what doesn't work.
And finally, to close out the show, can you give the brothers who read the website, the website is becomingthealphamuslim.com, is read mainly by brothers. There's a few sisters who read as well. But what's the one piece of advice you can give to young men or older men who are starting to take their faith seriously to improve?
My one piece of advice for those who are listeners to this thing is understand that being a man requires, in Islam, we have a real definition of what masculinity is. It's not sitting with a man cave watching football 12 hours a day. It's being knowledgeable and principled in your deen and guarding your friends and your family and your community, all right, and helping them, with their deen through knowledge, through companionship, and this is what our masculinity is guided by. Okay, this is what our masculinity is guided by, and it is not this misguided, disgusting thing that's developed on the quote unquote manosphere. Being a man has nothing to do with spending 5 hours a day bashing feminism on Reddit, waste of time. Being a man means having knowledge of your deen and then guarding your family and make sure your income is halal and helping your community survive the fitan that's coming. This is what a man is. And that's my advice to people who are just starting to, listen to, log on and keep in touch with the website. this is the summary, and that's the starting point, really, and it's up to you now. It's up to Nabil now. He'll fill in the details and help us, do it right.
Jazakumullah khair, Dr. Shadee Elmasry, scholar in residence and director of education and community affairs at the New Brunswick Islamic Center in New Jersey. Thank you so much for coming on the show. Nope. It's my pleasure to have you, inshallah. Can you just stay on the line as I close out the show?
Sure.
Okay, there you have it. That was Dr. Shadee Elmasry talking about the fundamentals. I've been meaning to have this episode for a while. Becoming the Alpha Muslim is not really about, it's not so much about talking about specific details on the Islamic sciences. I do talk about it now and then, but this is one episode that I really wanted to do because the actual fundamentals are the most important thing that will give you the correct mindset to actually go on your way to becoming that Alpha Muslim. If you've been through my 5-day email course, that's what we teach there as well. We teach you fundamentals to give you the Muslim mindset that will help you think the right way. And once you've got your mindset right, then a lot of these things sort of fall into place. You come across things that sort of don't fit into that mindset, you know that you can reject it. You can take stuff that's good for you and reject what's bad for you. Thank you very much for listening. If you enjoyed this episode, please leave me a review and a rating on iTunes or Stitcher, or iTunes and Stitcher. And that'll help me know if you are enjoying this content and if I should produce more. So I'll leave the links in the blog post when this episode is published, and then you can go ahead from there. Jazakumullah khair. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.